Okay, so today we're talking about parallel and perpendicular lines. We started talking about this, I believe it was Friday, and after all the days of testing, we may have forgotten. So there's some things that we want to remember. First off, when we talk about parallel lines, remember that parallel lines have the same slope. Okay, they have the same slope. So if I give you an example of y equals 2x plus 3, we know the slope of this line is 2. Hold on, y'all. We know the slope of this line is 2, right? So the slope of any line that's parallel to this line would also need to be 2. So we would say the parallel slope is 2. All right, keeping that in mind. So parallel lines have the same slope. All right, what's the second thing? Well, we need to also note that perpendicular lines, they don't have the same slope. They actually have slopes that are opposite reciprocals. Okay, they have slopes that are opposite reciprocals. And you may be wondering, what does opposite reciprocal mean? Because you've forgotten. Opposite means that it's going to be an opposite sign, right? So change the signs. Reciprocal means that you flip the fraction. So in the same example, if we have y equals 2x plus 3, where our slope is 2, right? Then if we're looking for the perpendicular slope, and this is the symbol for perpendicular, right? And we're looking for the perpendicular slope, then we change the sign, right? So instead of it being a positive 2, we put negative. And 2 can be written also as 2 over 1. So when we flip the fraction, basically what's in the denominator goes in the numerator, and what's in the numerator goes in the denominator. So it's going to be 1 over 2. So here is our perpendicular slope. All right, so that's perpendicular. This is parallel. So now we can go through a couple of examples just to make sure that we're all on one accord with what things are. If I give you an equation, y equals negative 3x plus 4, and I want to ask you, hey, tell me the parallel slope. Tell me the perpendicular slope. Feel free to pause the video to come up with the right answer. All right, so first off, when we talk about parallel slope, we know it has to have the same slope as the equation given. The slope of the equation given here is negative 3. So the parallel slope has to be also negative 3. Now, take note that negative 3 can be written as negative 3 over 1. So when we find the perpendicular slope, we take the opposite sign. So it's going to be positive, right? And then we flip that 3 over 1 to 1 over 3. So our answer for the perpendicular slope is positive 1 over 3. Boom. All right, so that's an example. Also, don't forget that you may see some examples where maybe you have y equals 3 minus 2 over 3x. And you may be tempted to say that the slope of this line is 3 right here. But note there is a minus, and this negative 2 over 3 is attached to the x. So our slope in this situation is actually negative 2/3. Well, what does that tell us? Well, first off, our parallel slope has to also be negative 2 over 3. And our perpendicular slope, by what we said here, has to change the sign so it becomes positive. And then the reciprocal, we flip. So this becomes positive 3 over 2. There we are. All right, so we got some examples here. One last example that I'd like to talk about is, what if I'm given an equation like x equals 3, and I want to find the parallel slope, right? That's the symbol for parallel, and then perpendicular slope. And you may be like, x equals 3, what is that? All right, it requires some remembering, right? Note that if I give you a graph, this is the y-axis, this is the x-axis. Any number, or not number, but any line that goes through the x-axis is written as x equals something. And any line that goes through the y-axis is going to be y equals a number. All right, take note that the slope of this vertical line is going to be undefined, and the slope of y equals is 0. So the horizontal line gives this information, and the vertical line gives this information right here. All right. So why do we do all that? So the slope of x equals, right? This is x equals. The slope is undefined, so that's the slope, undefined. And what's the slope of anything perpendicular? Well, this slope is perpendicular, and it's 0. So that's what we're going to write here, 0. So essentially, horizontal and vertical lines are perpendicular. Hopefully that helped, because now we're going to get into some examples. All right, so let me kind of get rid of this. Well, there we go. All right. Now let's look at some examples. So hopefully you wrote down the previous part. If you did not, then rewind and write it over here in this little space, right? You got all this space just for you to write down some little notes. All right, here we go. We're going to look at number 1. All right, number 1. It doesn't give the full instructions, but we're to write an equation of a line that passes through the point 2, 2 and is parallel to y equals x plus 4. Okay? So, how are we going to do that? We already discovered that when we're talking about parallel lines, they have the same slope. So if it's parallel to this equation, it's going to have the same slope as this equation. So the first thing we need to do is to note, what is the slope of this line? And hopefully what we realize is that it's 1. All right, so that means that any line that's parallel to this line should have a slope of 1. So that should cause us to eliminate certain answer choices, C and D. Not only does the line that we come up with have to be parallel and have a slope of 1, it also needs to pass through this point here, okay? So what we're going to do is use our calculator, all right? And I am going to look up the calculator that I need, which is, how do I get there? Let me press